Good morning, Evergreen. I hope this finds everybody doing well and still hunkering down well. Not going crazy yet. We're going to read chapter 11 today. Yesterday's chapter was chapter 10, and yesterday was called the sleigh burn. Today, chapter 11, called the phalangic. They get harder and harder to pronounce. Phalangic. It was the morning, the day after the successful fight with the sleigh burn. The sun rose above the gray clouds, casting a soft, diffused light on Black Pond. Maybe, thought Fanspew, the rain would hold off and the games would be unaffected. Last night, after the celebration, the senior frogs had declared today a game day. Partially because of that, the frogs woke up late, some tired, some sore from the previous evening's combat. Frogs don't frequently throw rocks, so more than a few of them nursed sore arms and shoulders. But, as Fanspew reflected, it was a good tiredness, a good soreness. His shoulders ached a bit, but he loosened the muscles by swinging his arms around and felt his normal self. He nudged Bubbles Lime awake from her grassy spot by the pond's edge. She stretched, smiling, looking forward to the game day. The two hopped companionably into the water, rinsed off, snacked on a few slow-moving bugs, and then floated in the water. They talked about last night, the adrenaline, the fear, the success. Fortune had favored their side last night, and they both thought there was a great chance they'd never see that sleigh burn again. They were right, too. But a sleigh burn isn't the only threat to frogs. The rest of the frog community began to gather for the start of the games. It wasn't going to be a full game day, more like half, as there were only two games. The first was a croaking game. This game might remind some of you of a human burping game. Like ours, this frog competition is made up of two objectives: croak the loudest, croak the longest. Also like ours, male teenagers and young adults are the participants. The difference? The females in the human game are typically grossed out by the burps and eventually will leave the room. You must admit it is disgusting. However, in the frogs, females are the judges, and this is a family affair. Fanspew took his place in the long line of males for his croaking game. There are about 20 croakers and 5 female judges. The first objective, the loudest croak, was also the most difficult to judge. The judges spaced themselves down the line, and when the head judge gave the signal and the 20 frogs gave their loudest croak, the judges would point to the frog in their hearing range that was the loudest. This resulted in 5 frogs making the final round. Fanspew reminded himself, volume, the goal, comes from forcing out the most air in the least amount of time, mouth wide open. Short burst, very loud. Head judge gave the signal and the grassy clearing erupted with croaks. High pitch, low pitch, you name it. The croaking was quickly over and 5 judges made their selections. Fanspew was surprised to be selected. Bubbles would be proud. The frogs not selected hopped back to the competition area, and the remaining 5 gathered together. For this portion, the frogs croak one at a time, one after the other, and then the judges huddle and pick the loudest. The spectators, and there were many, cheer for the one they think should win, and it seems that the judges typically see the crowd's point of view. Teenage frog went first. The crowd gave him a good cheer. The second, a handsome young frog, got a rapturous cheer, mainly fueled by several young females. Fanspew was the third to croak, gave it a full-throated best, and was rewarded with a loud, long cheer. Not for the first time, he wondered how much of his competition was decided by factors other than volume. As he contemplated that, number 4 and 5 went, with the cheering continuing. Fanspew, a good judge himself, mentally awarded the win to number 4, but the crowd didn't seem to support that. Judges went into their huddle, intense discussion, turned, and all 5 pointed at Fanspew. He hopped for joy, was congratulated by others, and hugged by Bubbles Lime. What a wonderful day. The second part of the croaking game was the competition for the longest croak. There was little subjectivity to this one. You simply had to hold the croak, loud enough for the judges to hear it, but not too loud to be wasting air, longer than everyone else. Again, the frogs formed up in a line. Again, 5 judges positioned themselves at intervals down the line. The head judge gave a sign, and the croaking began. Quieter, lower in pitch, almost soothing. Fanspew, now standing with the newly arrived Timos, missed time to start. He wanted to completely top off his lungs just as the judge gave the signal. If you inhale too quickly, then you would want to exhale too quickly. Inhale too late, and you would want to begin the contest without a full tank of air. Fanspew, perhaps still excited by his win, was a bit late. When the signal was given, he was still inhaling, so he had to start with less than full lungs. He gave it his best shot, miserly pushing out the air, keeping the volume just enough to be heard, but it was not enough. He ran out of air, gasping, before either of the frogs beside him did. A bit dejected, he hopped back to Bubbles Lime, and they watched the remainder of the competition. won by number 4 from the previous game. After a short break, when most of the frogs took as an opportunity to snack, the contestants for the second game gathered. This game, called the breathing game, for some unfathomable reason, was all about not breathing. The winner in this game was the frog who could hold his breath the longest. You can figure that this is a game with practical applications. Frogs in danger will often seek safety by diving underwater and staying there for quite a bit of time. The two frog teams formed up, made up by an observer and a diver, the diver being the breath holder. The diver would swim out into the pond and wait until the judge hollered, "Go!" Then each diver would take a deep breath and go under. Their partner on the shore would simply watch for them to surface when they ran out of air. When that happened, the partner would raise his or her hand. Last frog to raise his or her hand, and therefore the team whose diver stayed under the longest wins. Bubbles, Lime, and Fanspew were a team, Bubbles being the diver. She swam out to her favorite spot in the pond, a location where there was a submerged dead tree. Bubbles liked to hold on to the branch for this game. Fanspew stood on the shoreline with T-Moss watching her. The other participants positioned themselves, and at the same instant the judge croaked, "Go!" Fanspew said, "Huh." Other frogs were diving. T-Moss looked at him. "What?" Fanspew looked pensive. "Bubbles started too early. You know, she dived before the judge said go." T-Moss, studying his friend. "So?" Silence from Fanspew. He was replaying the scene in his mind. Bubbles had arrived at her favorite spot after a short swim, turned around to face the shore, and then vanished underwater. It was fast. It was like she was yanked under, T-Moss. T-Moss was confused. Yanked under? Really? By what? Fanspew spoke over his shoulder, hopping outward to the water's edge. "No idea, but I'm going to go check." He plunged in, swimming strongly, and it started to rain, after all. Fanspew covered the distance to where Bubbles had gone down in 2 minutes. He scanned the water around him, not wanting to miss her if she had surfaced while he swam. He saw T-Moss on the shore, even a short distance, able to discern the concern on his friend's face. Took a deep breath and dove. Black Pond was about 3 feet deep in this area, and Fanspew could see the bottom easily. He accidentally dove several feet from the submerged tree, so kicked his way over to it. He saw Bubbles almost immediately in the clear water and swam toward her. She wasn't holding on to a branch. Odd. But from his vantage, it looked like she was just floating about a foot from the bottom. Was that a shadow below her, on the bottom? He swam into her sight, and she kicked her legs. Didn't move. Her eyes were wide, and the shadow below her came into focus as he got closer. It was a fish, which seemed to be holding on to her. One of the fins looked like it had a hand at the end of the fin, and that hand, with long white fingers, wrapped tightly around her upper leg, holding her under. Fanspew took Bubbles' hand. The barely controlled panic in her eyes receded a little. He took a closer look at the fish, and this time recognized it as a phalanges ichthoid, or, if you remember from his youth, a phalangic. Phalanges means fingers. Ichthoids mean fish. It was a fish with fingers, with small hands, located at the end of the mid-body fin. The fin was otherwise unremarkable. The fish was otherwise unremarkable, save for its ridiculously small mouth. But Fanspew now remembered that's why the phalangic drowns its victims. With that small mouth, it can only nibble, so no live frog is going to sit there long enough to be nibbled to death. So the phalangic drowns its target, then enjoys a leisurely meal. These thoughts whipped through Fanspew's head, and 1/10 the time it takes me to tell you this. While thinking, he swam behind and below Bubbles and grasped the hand holding her leg, got a good grip and tried to peel off the fingers. It was very hard to get leverage, and the phalangic clamped down even more. He tried again, concentrating both hands on just one finger. No luck. He kept a good eye out for Phalangic's other hand, but it never attempted to catch him. He swam back to his wife and touched her cheek. Her eyes were wider now, and he knew she must be getting short on breath, and another minute he'd need to surface himself. His concern for Bubbles was clamoring out clear thought. How to get her loose? Starting to panic himself, to move back down and grab the fingers, tried to peel them off again. Nothing. Back up to Bubbles' face. She pointed to her mouth. "I need air." He did too, and suddenly he had a wonderful idea. He kicked up to the surface, grabbed air, gulped air, filled his lungs, went back down. He moved right up to his wife and blew Bubbles in her face. She caught on immediately, blew out some of her stale air, and putting her lips on his, sucked in the fresh air from his lungs. Again the panic receded. Fanspew, out of air himself, kicked back up to the surface, breathed deeply, saw T-Moss, saw the clearing where just last evening they had pelted rocks at the eyes of the Slayburn. Fanspew paused and froze in mid-inhale, The eyes. No rocks, but his fingers should work, right? He took a deep breath, dove, swam down behind Bubbles, came in from behind and above the phalangic. Slowly as he approached, he came up to the dorsal fin, from high 6 o'clock of the fish, arms and hands extended, fingers rigid, jabbing them as hard as he could while kicking forward into the fish's eyes. He missed the right eye, hitting instead the bottom eyelid. Random thought, do fish even have eyelids? But the left hand struck true, his middle finger sinking into the cold gel up to the second knuckle. The phalangic thrashed its tail, jerked away from the sudden onslaught, and naturally released that which would slow it down, Bubbles. She didn't pause, streaked for the surface, followed closely by her husband. They popped up like ping-pong balls, gasping for air. Bubbles glanced over her shoulder to ensure Fanspew was with her, and without a word set out for shore. Fanspew followed closely, head down in the water, looking for the phalangic. It was moving in a jerky fashion, obviously hurt, and Fanspew briefly relived the feel of his finger in the fisheye. His stomach gave an unhappy lurch, and he kicked more strongly to catch up with Bubbles' line. They had to get to the shore to pass the word. He thought proudly, I don't think I can catch up to her. The rain had stopped. The end.